The log called them minor losses, but I watched men fold into mud from one clean crack. My hands were cold enough to fumble metal, yet I still wiped the lens and held my breath until the wind covered me. I did not fire when I could. I waited until the shot would stop the next movement, then I crawled away before they learned my place. Afterward, my superiors wanted times and exact points on a map, ink drying under a stamp I did not trust. I kept moving and let the paper chase me in the dark. Winter fighting during the Second World War. A contested stretch of front line held by exhausted infantry in shallow trenches and scraped-out pits. The ground is half frozen, half mud. Trees are splintered and blackened, with bark peeled away by fragments. Visibility changes by the hour, low cloud, hard wind. Then a clear patch of sky that makes every movement dangerous. The operational situation is simple on paper. Two lines face each other across broken ground. Both sides probe with patrols, send out wiring parties, and trade small arms fire. Neither side has the spare strength to waste men. Yet men keep being wasted. In this sector, the problem is not artillery, not tanks, not aircraft. It is single shots, one crack, a pause, then someone does not stand back up. The local command keeps the daily log in a dugout with a low roof. A clerk writes by lantern light. Ink thickens in the cold. Paper curls where it has dried and then been damp again. The same phrases are stamped into routine. Enemy activity observed. Minor losses. Patrol returned. The lines look controlled. The reality that above ground is a line that flinches. That a sniper is already part of the system here. Not a figure of legend. A worker with a rifle assigned to reduce risk in small ways. He is attached to the infantry holding the sector. He is not described in early records by name. He is described by task. Designated marksman. Observer. Counter-sniper. His routine begins before the light. He checks the lens for haze and grit. He wipes it with cloth that has been dried near a stove and smells faintly of smoke. He tests the bolt with slow pressure, listening for any roughness. He feels the sling for frayed stitches. He counts cartridges by touch and puts them back in the same order. He makes sure nothing metallic can clink. Camouflage is not a costume. It's a set of rules. No straight lines. No shine. No movement that repeats. And he adds damp earth to cloth and lets it dry in patches so it matches the ground. He rubs mud into his hands so pale skin does not flash. He ties torn fabric into a loop for local vegetation, then changes it when the vegetation changes. He does not go out to hunt. He goes out to make a small patch of the front line safer by narrowing the enemy's options. He is used to being one tool among many. He is used to being ignored when the loud weapons speak. In this sector, he is suddenly asked for impossible results, not by a dramatic speech, by a simple note in a dull pencil hand. Stop the bleeding. Reduce enemy fire. Do what you can. Early signs of limitation appear immediately. The enemy is not careless. The enemy uses decoys. A helmet on a stick, a sleeve stuffed with straw, a board dragged by a string. The first shot that comes too quickly wastes time and gives away position. He learns to let these things pass. He watches instead for weight, for the slight lag of a real knee settling into mud, for the way breath fogs, then clears. He learns the line's habits. Infantry on his side lift their heads at the same spots to look out. A runner always uses the same shallow fold in the ground. A sentry taps ash from a cigarette in the same angle of wind. These habits draw fire. He begins to change them, not with arguments, but with small instructions. He points to an alternate route. He scratches a new mark in the mud with a stick. He takes a man's helmet and dulls the edge with soot. The operational problem grows gradual, then sharp. Enemy shots pick off men doing ordinary things, a pair carrying a box of ration tins, a man fetching water, and a medic bending to tighten a bandage. The casualties are not massed, so they are easily dismissed. They appear in the log as a few lines, but the lived effect is a platoon that moves too slowly and watches too little. The sniper begins with restraint, because restraint is survival. He chooses positions that are not obvious, not the best view, not the highest rise. He chooses the places that look unhelpful and therefore draw fewer eyes. A shallow depression behind broken brush, a crater with water skimmed over by ice, a hollow under a root mass where the earth hangs like a lid. He builds the position with hands that ache. He scrapes away loose snow and lays it aside so the fresh colour is not visible. He presses a flat of cloth into the mud so it takes on the same texture. He sets his rifle on a support that will not sink or shift. And he does not fire to test. He does not waste the first shot. He watches for hours without moving. His breathing is measured. His blink is timed with gusts of wind that move the branches. He uses the same discipline to prevent the enemy from learning his rhythm. He does not fire whenever a target appears. He fires when the shot supports the system. That system is not written down in a manual in this sector. It is built by necessity. Target selection, shot timing, relocation, then silence, then the same cycle again, never in a pattern the enemy can map. The first day is not a tally. It is a method being tested against an intelligent opponent. He identifies the enemy's likely observation points, a dark gap in wrecked fencing, a cut in the tree line that forms a straight view to his trench, a mound that looks natural but is too symmetrical. Yet he watches for the smallest betrayals, a flick of cloth, a brief shape that breaks the line of shadows. When he finally fires, it is not a rapid series. It is one shot. Then stillness. He waits. He does not look up to see the effect. He keeps his eye on the area where a return fire might come from. He listens for the delayed report from the far side. He watches for the flinch of a second shooter reacting. Return fire does come, but not accurately. The enemy shoots at the general direction of the sound. The shots strike bark, throw up bits of frozen earth, and cut twigs. His position is already compromised in principle, even if not precisely. He does not argue with his own pride, he does not stay. He begins his first relocation exactly as practiced. He withdraws by inches, pulling back like a slow tide, and he covers disturbed ground with loose debris. He avoids stepping in a clean line. He takes a different path than the one he came in on. He pauses in a fold of ground to watch behind him. Then he moves again. At the next position, he does not immediately resume firing. He resumes watching. He uses the hours to confirm what the enemy is doing in response. He looks for the men who do not belong to the usual routine. A figure moving low, careful, carrying something long. A pair working together with practiced timing. A messenger who moves from one point to another with urgency. These are not common infantry tasks. They suggest countersnipers, or observers guiding them. The strain begins to show in the men around him. Infantry ask for quick answers. They want him to shoot at every movement. They want noise to meet noise. And he answers with small gestures instead. A hand held low, meaning wait. A finger drawn across his own sleeve, meaning still. He is not building a legend. He is building a dead zone. Word of his first successes moves in the way rumours travel in trenches, not in grand announcements, in pauses in conversation, in men standing a little taller behind cover, in a runner choosing to cross an open patch because he believes it might be watched now. The command responds with doctrine and paperwork. They request that he confirm results, as if the front can be measured neatly. A messenger brings a slip of paper and a stub of pencil, a form that asks for time, position and outcome. He fills it in as best he can without telling more than necessary. He uses general wording, he keeps his description short, and he knows that written detail travels up the chain and can travel back down to other eyes. The second day begins with a new complication. The enemy changes its routine. Movements become less frequent, but more cautious. A helmet decoy appears again, then disappears. Smoke is used to mask a short rush. A body is dragged out of sight quickly after a hit, reducing visible confirmation. The enemy does not want him to see the effect. The enemy wants to deny him information. He adapts by shifting his target selection. He stops trying to win individual exchanges. He focuses on the points that shape the enemy's behaviour. Observers, messengers, men who set up small screens of brush, those who place boards over mud so boots do not leave prints, those who peek repeatedly from the same notch of cover. And he uses strict shot timing to make himself unreadable. He will hold a perfect shot and let it go, not because he cannot make it, because a pattern is more dangerous than a miss. If he fires only when the enemy offers an easy target, the enemy learns what easy looks like and changes it. If he fires at a fixed rhythm, the enemy listens and adjusts. He breaks these expectations by refusing to take the bait and by taking the unanticipated shot instead. His patience is not calm by nature, it is forced by experience. He feels the cold in his joints like an old injury. His mouth is dry from breathing through cloth. He swallows without sound. He keeps his jaw loose so his teeth do not click. He peels a strip of tape and rewraps it around a small metal buckle to stop a faint scrape. The environment is constant pressure. Mud sucks at boots. A frost cracks under a knee if weight is shifted too quickly. Snow melts on the fabric and then refreezes, stiffening it. A gust can carry his scent toward the enemy line if he has eaten strongly flavoured rations. He chooses bland food when he can. He eats slowly, behind cover, wiping grease from his fingers so it does not stain his rifle stock. He learns the sound map of this front, the soft clink of a spade on a stone, the rasp of wire being tightened, the distant cough of a machine gun cooling and being handled, the peculiar flat slap of a round striking wet earth, the sharper crack of a round snapping through a branch. He uses these sounds to time his own shots, so his report blends into the landscape of violence. A shot fired into silence is a bell. A shot fired inside a burst of other noise is harder to place. And by the middle of the second day, counter-sniper pressure increases. The enemy begins firing at likely positions in sequence, not at random, methodical, around at a tree stump, then around at a crater lip, then another at a low ridge. The shots do not try to hit him directly at first. They try to force movement. They try to make him reveal himself by flinching or relocating too quickly. He refuses. He becomes still in ways that hurt. He presses his face into damp cloth. He accepts numbness as a tool. He lets mud seep through fabric and cool his skin. He waits until the sequence passes, then waits longer. Then he withdraws with the same slow control, not giving the enemy a clean sound to chase. That night, he does not sleep properly. Few do. He rests in short intervals, sitting with his back against a wood, listening for changes. And a runner brings him a cup of thin drink that tastes faintly of smoke and tin. He drinks without looking up. He checks his hands for tremor. He flexes his fingers to maintain control. Official doctrine in many armies treats sniping as a special skill, useful but limited. A single rifle is not supposed to shape the whole line. In this sector, the front does not have the resources to accept that limitation. It needs the rifle to behave like a system, multiplying its effect through method. By the third day, the 72-hour stretch tightens into a narrow window of opportunity. Weather steadies, visibility improves. The enemy becomes more active again, perhaps believing the pressure has passed, perhaps being compelled by orders that do not match what is happening at the trench edge. Wiring parties move out. And a small team crawls forward with tools and bundles. An observer attempts to re-establish a view. A messenger runs low and fast between points. The sniper's routine becomes almost mechanical but not rigid. He observes, he selects, he waits, he fires, then he leaves. Every action is followed by concealment. Every concealment is followed by a change of place. He uses multiple prepared positions, each with small differences. One offers a narrow view of a single approach route. Another offers a wider view but poorer cover. A third offers an oblique angle on the enemy's likely firing points. He does not use any position twice in a row. He does not enter by the same path. He does not depart by the same path. His attrition system is built from small constraints. He limits shots. He limits exposure. He limits predictability. And he makes the enemy spend time and caution to do simple tasks. He forces pauses. He creates gaps in routine. Those gaps slow the enemy and reduce pressure on his own line. If any number becomes associated with this stretch later, it is because the line begins to count in order to understand what is happening. Men who would normally avoid numbers start asking how many were stopped from moving, not with pride, but with a practical hunger for certainty. They want to know if the danger in the open patch is reduced. They want to know if the wiring party will make it back. They want to know if a medic can crawl out without being targeted. The records, when they exist, are imperfect. A shot does not always leave clear confirmation. The enemy may pull the wounded back, a hit may be assumed from a sudden stillness, and then later contradicted by movement in the same area. Some outcomes are logged as observed effect, not as confirmed. In reports written after, the language stays cautious, according to field notes, reported by observers, estimated. That restraint is part of the truth. Still, the lived effect in those 72 hours becomes undeniable. A small patch of front line becomes a place the enemy avoids, not completely abandoned, but treated like a hazard that must be respected. A runner slows there, a head does not appear in the usual notch. A man with a tool bag crawls a longer route instead of the direct one. Time is lost, energy is sent. Morale shifts in small, measurable ways. The turning point is not a single shot. It is a decision made in the middle of exhaustion. And he stops thinking about single targets as worth it or not worth it. He starts thinking about sequence. He targets the action that enables other actions, the man setting a board, the figure who signals, the one who always looks first, the one who carries a coil of wire, the one who checks an angle before others move. This is an unofficial adjustment because it is not written in doctrine as a fixed rule. It is learned at ground level. It is also risky. Those targets are watched by the enemy's own best eyes. The counter-sniper threat grows sharper as he interferes with the enemy's systems. Risk becomes personal in quiet ways. His ear develops a slight ringing from repeated reports and nearby impacts. His cheekbone becomes tender from pressure against the stock in cold conditions. A small cut on his knuckle will not heal cleanly, a reopening each time he grips and crawls. He wraps it in cloth. The cloth becomes damp. He replaces it with another strip torn from a lining. He keeps going. At one point, a near miss tears fabric close to his shoulder. Not dramatic. Just a sudden, soft punch of air and a snap of thread. He freezes. He does not check the tear immediately. He waits for a second shot that might follow movement. Only when nothing comes does he inch back and feel with his fingertips. He finds the hole. He presses mud into it so the torn edge does not flap. The counter-snipers attempt triangulation. They listen for report and impact. They watch for the faint disturbance of smoke or dust. They fire at likely exit routes. They send their own observers to spots that can see his side's cover. In response, he changes how he leaves. He waits longer after firing. And he withdraws during noise from other weapons. He moves only when wind picks up. He sometimes stays in place, holding still, letting the enemy waste shots at nothing while he has already shifted his rifle to a different slit of view. The consequence is that the enemy's counter-snipers lose efficiency. They fire more, hit less. They exhaust their own patience. They must reposition too, and each reposition carries its own risk. A counter-sniper forced to move is a counter-sniper who can be seen. The infantry around him begin to modify their own routine because the dead zone gives them confidence. They carry supplies in shorter dashes timed with the sniper's quiet signals. They repair wire with fewer pauses. They move the wounded with better odds. The line becomes less paralyzed. Authority notices, and an authority reacts in two directions at once. One direction is approval expressed in cautious praise, a note acknowledging improved conditions, a signature, a stamp, a suggestion that the method should be shared. The other direction is control and order to provide more detailed logs, a demand to identify exact firing points for coordination, a requirement that he report to a superior officer for briefing. This is where institution and lived reality begin to grind against each other. The sniper understands that detail can become vulnerability. If exact positions are written, they can be leaked, captured, or simply repeated by careless talk. If his methods become a checklist, they become predictable. If his number becomes a trophy, it becomes a lure for reckless behavior by others. He responds with cautious compliance. And he submits reports that emphasize procedure rather than spectacle. He describes the need for movement. He notes counter-sniper activity. He writes about observation and patience. He avoids turning his work into a list of kills. He knows how headquarters sometimes reads numbers as permission to demand more numbers. He knows how numbers are used in communiques. In the dugout, the clerk recopies parts of his notes into cleaner handwriting. The clerk's fingers are ink-stained. A blotter pad is used to dry the page. The page is stamped restricted. A carbon copy is made, thin and faint. The copy is placed in a folder with string ties. Someone adds a routing slip with arrows and initials. As the file travels upward, the language changes. Well, what was observed effect becomes confirmed. What was local improvement becomes model success. A phrase appears that suggests the impossible has been done, not in the sniper's own words, in the institution's hunger to package experience into doctrine and morale. Pushback arrives from another angle as well. A senior figure questions whether one sniper should be allowed to operate with so much independence. There are concerns about coordination with artillery, about friendly movement, about responsibility if a shot hits the wrong figure. These concerns are not foolish. They are procedural. They are also detached from what the sector can actually manage. Paper wants certainty. The front line cannot supply it. The sniper is called in for a briefing. He arrives with mud still on his boots and dried salt at the edge of his collar. Up inside, the air is warmer, and that warmth makes him feel the ache he has ignored. A map is spread on a table. Someone points with a pencil. Someone asks for exact spots. Someone asks for exact times. He answers with generality, careful not to lie, careful not to expose. He emphasizes relocation. He explains that any single spot becomes dangerous once it is known. He describes counter-sniper behavior in broad terms. He speaks about timing, about not firing whenever a target appears, about refusing predictable rhythm. Some in the room understand. They have seen what routines do to men. Others want a simpler story, a hero story that can be told in a bulletin, a number that can be repeated, a clean result. The stakes peak quietly in the days after the 72-hour stretch, not because of a grand showdown, but because the system the sniper built can be broken by the institution's response. If his methods are turned into a script, the enemy will learn it. If his success is broadcast, the enemy will send more counter-snipers. If his positions are written too precisely, those pages become targets themselves. Censorship and propaganda pressure appear in ordinary forms. A notice about what can be mentioned in letters, a reminder that specific methods are not to be discussed outside the unit, an instruction that after-action reports must be passed through a designated officer, a warning that unverified claims damage credibility, a different warning that low-morale language is unacceptable. The institution tries to control both exaggeration and doubt at the same time. The sniper returns to the front with less freedom than before. And he is assigned a liaison, a man whose job is to coordinate. The liaison is not cruel. He's just doing what he's been told. He carries a notebook. He asks for timings. He wants to know when the sniper will fire so others can move. The sniper understands the desire. He also understands that predictability is what the enemy needs, so he changes again. He does not fight the liaison. He educates him by routine. He signals only general windows. He refuses to promise shots. He refuses to become a metronome. He insists on relocation as the core rule. He demonstrates how quickly a position becomes hot. He shows the liaison the marks on bark where counter-sniper rounds have struck. He points out how the enemy tests likely hiding places. Over time, the liaison learns to accept uncertainty as part of coordination. Their movements are planned with flexibility. Men are taught to avoid repeating routes. The dead zone remains dangerous, but it is now a managed danger rather than a paralyzing one. The aftermath of the 72-hour stretch is not a parade. It is paperwork and routine. Rations are issued. Wet socks are hung near a stove. A medic sharpens scissors and boils instruments. A mechanic cleans mud out of a small generator. A signal operator dries a coil of wire and labels it with a smudged tag. The sniper cleans his rifle with the same care he used before because the front has not ended. In later reporting, the story becomes flattened. A number is sometimes attached to it, because institutions like numbers. That number is repeated without all the caveats that should follow it. The conditions are not always described. The hours of waiting vanish from memory. The missed opportunities, deliberate or forced, are rarely mentioned. The relocations become a footnote. The counter-sniper pressure becomes background noise. What remains true, according to accounts that focus on method rather than myth, is the shape of the work. A lone sniper can turn a small patch of front line into a dead zone for a time, not by magic aim, by discipline, by refusing to fire whenever he can, by choosing targets that shape behavior, by moving before the enemy can triangulate, by treating each shot as a signal the enemy will study. The quiet legacy is not the number. It is the idea that patience can function as an attrition system, that camouflage is not decoration but procedure, that relocation is not retreat but survival mathematics, that the enemy is always learning, and so the sniper must always deny the enemy a pattern. In the institutional archive, if such papers survive, the file may sit under a bland label. Sector report, infantry notes, marksman activity. It may be incomplete, it may be sanitized. Names may be omitted by habit or design. The most important parts may exist only in the margins, in pencil, written by tired hands that knew what mattered. On the ground, among the men who lived under single shots and learned to move differently, the memory is more practical. They remember that a certain stretch became safer to cross. They remember that a wiring party came back. They remember that observers stopped exposing themselves in the same notch. They remember that the line stopped flinching quite so much. The sniper's own routine continues. And that continuation is the final truth of it. He returns to the same tasks, checking, waiting, relabeling, hiding, filing, burning scraps that could betray a position. He does not chase a number again just to chase it. He repeats only what works, and changes everything else as soon as it becomes predictable. If the war ends later, that end arrives through large forces and many decisions. This story does not claim otherwise. It stays with a small patch of front line and a disciplined system built from patience. It stays with the kind of work that rarely becomes a clean headline. It stays with the quiet fact that survival often depends on refusing to give the enemy an answer they can use. If you want more restrained stories about overlooked wartime routines and the people who carried them, consider subscribing.